Hi, this is Minis Joannides. This is the Optimum Academy Pulmonary video #1, Introduction to Pulmonary Disease. So I'm the Chief Medical Director at Optimum Life Reinsurance, and today we're going to talk about an introduction to pulmonary disease. So let's talk about the bronchial tree. So the bronchial tree is kind of like a tree that's turned upside down. So the trunk is at the top, that's the trachea, and then it branches out into the main bronchi, and then the leaves are basically the alveoli in the lungs. And you can see on this slide how the lungs are arranged and how the bronchial tubes get smaller and smaller as they get to the periphery of the lungs where the alveoli are, where the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange takes place. So we're going to talk about pulmonary terminology. The respiratory rate is the number of breaths per minute. Bronchitis is an inflammation of the bronchial tubes. It can be from an infection or just an irritation from some other inflammatory process. Pneumonia is an infection in the lung tissue involving the air sacs of the lung. Pulmonary function test or spirometry are tests to determine lung function. Asthma is an inflammation of the airways causing shortness of breath, wheezing, and coughing. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, abbreviated COPD, is a group of chronic lung diseases, including emphysema, chronic bronchitis, or a combination of the two. Oxygen saturation, expressed in percentage, is the percentage of oxygen in the blood as measured by an oximeter, which is a clip that's put on a finger. Hemoptysis. You see that word? It means the applicant is coughing up blood from the respiratory tract. And inhaled bronchodilators, medication that's administered right to the lungs via an inhaler to help open up the breathing tubes. So let's talk about obstructive pulmonary disease, pardon me, which is any disease which obstructs the outflow of air from the lungs. This includes COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, or asthma, or reactive, pardon me, airway disease. And that's usually reversible. So asthma is a reversible type disease, whereas COPD may be more on the permanent side with maybe a minor contribution of reversible disease. Any irritant to the bronchial tubes or lung air sacs, as smoking tobacco, makes all of these diseases worse. So when we have airway obstruction, you can see in the picture, two breathing tubes, a normal airway, which is open and there's a lot of space for the air to pass in and out. And what happens during obstruction, as in asthma, where there's narrowing of the airway with limited airflow because of tightened muscles, which are constricting the airway. And then on the interior part of the airway is inflamed and there's thickened airway wall with mucus production. So the airflow in that airway is obstructed and less air can pass in and out. Restrictive lung disease is any cause of reduction in lung volume or the ability of the lungs to expand with air. So restrictive lung disease, contrasted with obstructive that we had just talked about, is damage to or removal of part of the lungs. So if a portion of the lung is removed from surgery, that would be under restrictive lung disease. Any chest wall deformities like scoliosis or pectus excavatum, where the chest wall is actually pushing in on the lung That could cause restrictive lung disease. Interstitial lung disease is also included in restrictive lung disease. And then diseases like silicosis or other occupational lung diseases from inhaling irritants into the lung with fibrosis. That is also under restrictive lung disease, and diseases like sarcoidosis. That would be included in restrictive lung disease. Pulmonary infections. So we mentioned the term bronchitis, which is an inflammation of the bronchial tubes, cough, mucus production. Bronchiolitis is infection or inflammation of the smaller airways, and that term is often used in juveniles that have a viral infection with inflammation, wheezing, coughing. Pneumonia is an actual infection in the lung parenchymal tissue, and it could be bacterial, like pneumococcal pneumonia. It could be viral, like in COVID, or it could be fungal, like coccidioidomycosis, which is also called valley fever, noted in southwest US, and that's due to a fungus. Lung abscess is actually a cavity in the lung with infectious material inside the cavity. Those are much harder to treat and require a longer treatment program than a pneumonia. And then things like tuberculosis, which is an infection in the lung tissue with a bacteria, Mycobacterium TB. So this is just the first in a series of videos on pulmonary. So please join with us to continue our tour through pulmonary diseases.